right, lads. Welcome to the Hot Ball with Dubs TV as part of the class of '95. Look back on the amazing year, and since it's the 25-year anniversary, we thought it'd be great to catch up with you. I know we'd all rather be doing this in person, and he's had big plans this year. And Clarke, I know you were on the committee that was organising everything, so it's a shame that it's done online, but at least we get to have this moment and share it with the fans as well. But before we kick into things, I just want to check in on you all. How you all doing? Is all?
Yeah, great.
Yeah,
festive decorations are up except for Vinnie.
No, that's in the front room. I'm in the spare room.
Vinnie's in the West Wing.
Yeah, West Wing. I'm in the doghouse as usual.
At Christmas time, it's never a good thing, Vinnie.
No, never in the doghouse anymore. Done all that in my 20s. Don't do it anymore.
Yeah, we might get into that later on when we talk about after '95. We won't get into it now.
We'll see.
But look, it's kind of it's a weird year because I know you had the 25-year anniversary as part of that. You get to go for the All-Ireland Final, get to go there on match day and be in the parade and be announced at half-time. Like, Clarke, you were doing a lot of work on this as part of fundraising to make sure that everyone was kitted out, and I spoke to Anthony Daly about it because obviously Clare were in the '95, and I don't think he'll ever get over not being able to be on the pitch on All-Ireland Final day. So how have you been handling?
Yeah, well, it's funny. I went through my emails just on the reunion thing. I have the WhatsApp group, and it's been ongoing for maybe 10 or 15 years. I got all the numbers together, including the people that were involved from the county board to our physios, our doctors, our management, every player that was on the squad. And we had a reunion after 20 years in Castleknock Golf Club, and it went really, really well. So it was always in the back of the mind that we had to prepare for the likes of this. And we set up a nice, tidy committee myself, Nick Galvin, Jack Sheedy and Paul Beelan. And it was a year ago that I looked at my WhatsApp and emails that we actually met for the first time to discuss the September. So it was a year in advance, September to September. And the plan was to have some sort of golf day that we could get together, have a bite to eat, game of golf, a few beers, and then have a luncheon. And what we did was we sought advice and help from previous teams. And it wasn't previous Dublin teams because it was so far back since they last won in All-Ireland. So we touched base with the likes of Down, Derry, Donegal, and just see what they did. And obviously the element is different to us because we weren't going to travel to Dublin. They were going to do an overnight, overnight in the hotel, go to the All-Ireland and probably overnight a second night. So the dynamic of that was going to change for us. But we had a great day planned in Royal Dublin. We had a bit of gear to give the players like commemorative golf gear. We were going to have a luncheon, and the support for that was unbelievable. Like, as soon as people reached out and they heard it was the '95, it was like it was memories flowed back to people, who may be in business now, are doing well and they're going well in business. But when they were like in their teens, that was the first time they seen Dublin win an All-Ireland, and that was a big memory to them. So we had over 40 tables lined up and pretty much done deal to support us that particular day. And all people wanted to do was meet the squad, and we were going to have a squad member, team member sitting at a table and take it from there. We had a number of musicians and performers going to be there on the day as well. Obviously, we had the big plus. The big plus was that we were able to say we're going to have Dublin's last few All-Ireland winning managers being up at a top stage and answering questions. Pat Gilroy and Jim Gavin, and then as it was turning out this year, we knew that Desi would be able to, so, Desi might be able to slot in somewhere into that too, So it was makings of a great year, but unfortunately it didn't work out.
But look, it is a pity. I was kind of looking forward to seeing what Such is picked as well, because I didn't know if it was going to be the Liverpool team of the white suits with Jack Sheedy on the panel. Like, I've seen some of the outfits that Jack's worn to a few of the events, and they're questionable to say the least, but Jack can pull them off. Had you decided on, did you guys, Vinnie, Charlie, would you have had a say in any of that now, or is that just left to Clarke and his fashion sense?
That'd be down to senior management. Clarke, junior management here would have no say in that whatsoever. Clarke is
that was a sartorial matter. Clarke would be the man for that.
He's a friendly guy. He always has been. He
has been.
Even
the worst man you ever seen with a pocket watch.
You know, Mutton dressed up as lamb. We would have been perfect.
Do you remember the pocket watch, Clarke? The 3-piece.
How long the ties would have been tied and the shorts being buttoned there would have been a different thing altogether. You know, I don't know how long that would have lasted. You know.
Well, I heard, Clarke, that you were outvoted. You wanted to have a cravat.
Yeah, well, I did. I told Conor McGregor, go away. You're not even in the same ballpark. Not interested, Conor. Go away. We'll sort this out ourselves. You know.
Okay.
Well, that could
I was waiting for the pop watch. That's what I was waiting for.
Yeah, I still think there's talk of this moment going to happen again, maybe next year or something. I know you're talking to the GAA about doing something else, but
we spoke. Alan Milton in Croke Park has been brilliant all along, because we were able to touch base with him and to be asked him the questions like what actually happens on the day, because they were the type of things we wanted to know as well, because there is an element where, you know, you bring the team and subs, but we had an extended panel. There was another 10 players, you know, there or thereabouts on our squad. So as an organising group and committee, we sort of said, well, that's not going to happen. The idea of that 26 players and partners, we sort of said, well, look, well, we're making sure that every member of that squad is going to be there. So there's no disrespect to that. We were going to say, look, all players are going to be there and all management is going to be there. And if we could get in, you know, our medics or anything like that as well, we were going to make sure that all of that group was going to be together, you know.
Just on that, Charlie, like, whenever I meet the 95 lads, there's such a great bond there. Like, genuinely, like, the crack is always going anytime they're around one another. I thought it was crazy that it was nearly 20 years later before you had that official big meetup. And it's actually something that it'll be 10 years next year from when we won in 2011. And we were like, oh, look, we need to do something now. It's 10 years. We don't want to get to 20. Was that something that just, because you were meeting up so much as a group, that it never really crossed your mind?
I think we had been through so much in from 91 all the way through to the success in 95. And as I said, we were sort of battle scarred, that we were actually much closer together then than probably most teams would have been. And when we finally started to reach the top of the mountain in 95, it was a lot of relief there, a lot of enjoyment, obviously. But I think we probably spent so much time in one of those company that we're happy to sort of separate our ways. So you're quite right. And then whenever we meet up, there's great bond. And I say to every team I've ever been involved with, any team that wins a championship, and particularly in All Ireland, there's a bond that's there for life, and that bond will never be broken. You may not see one another for many years, but when you meet up again, that bond is immediate. Like Steinsy is away, lives in Australia, and he comes home most, if not every, for the last 10 or 15 years, coming home for the PGA, doing Croke Park, the year of the All Ireland, and it's like he's never been away. I'm actually meeting him. He lives in Australia more than I meet Vinnie or Clarke there most it's crazy to think, but yeah, you're right. The bond is still there, but lads still meet up individually. We don't meet up as a group, but you meet up with, you know, all of McDeegan is 50 yards up the road here. I see him more than I see my own children most times, you know. So, and I'm sure Clarke around where he lives and Vinnie where they live, they're running into boys all the time. So, but yeah, it's a bond that's never broken ever. And the same way with you, Eamon. You're 2011 guys, you know the bond I'm referring to. And no matter where you go, what part of the world, how long you've been away, the bond is still there.
Like, you know, we meet up by chance, you know. But as Charlie said, there is a bond. Like if my phone, and like everybody, we nearly have each other's number of the squad in our phone. But if my phone lit up and it was one of the 95 crew, I know I'd have a smile on my face, you know. And look, in our WhatsApp group, we shared a lot of information. And like we're at a generation now, unfortunately, that a lot of the stuff maybe sad news or bad news, but there's always a response. There's a respect there that, you know, will never be taken away, because ultimately you'll always say like we wouldn't have won anything without each other. Ultimately, that's it. Not just one person, but the whole group. So like if my phone rang and it got a text and was someone's name on it, and I went, like the other day, Robbie Boyle rang me. I haven't spoken to Robbie Boyle in ages. Robbie Boyle, Maren's Oil. I went, wow, like you're not looking.
Are you going to go to Mullingar?
Huh?
Are you going to go to Mullingar? No.
Shamrocks, no. I passed that on to somebody else in the 95 crew.
But Vinny, that like
What's me?
As Charlie kind of mentioned there, that bond that comes from being battle hardened and having them scars and going through the dark days. Like it's great to celebrate on them big occasions and to get to the pinnacle of the All Ireland. Like, you know, that just kind of bounds it all together. But like the going through 91 and then the heartache of 2 All Ireland final losses, it's them moments as well that really strengthens the panel. I think they're the big things that kind of last you and stand you when you can go through that as a team and then come out the other side and win the All Ireland.
Yeah, well, look, I suppose it started before even 91. You know, we would have been there from 88, Clarke 84, Charlie 83. So there's an awful lot of water passed under the bridge before 95, and there was an awful lot of heartache as well for a lot of players. You know, I suppose the heartache started for me would have been in 88 when we were beaten by Meath, and a great Meath team and great Cork teams in the late 80s and early 90s, and then 91 and into 92. But for about 7 or 8 years, I would say we were, if we weren't the best team in the country, we were beaten by the best team in the country. And we were the most consistent team over a period of maybe 8-9 years, and we just couldn't get over the line for multiple reasons. And I think when it came to 95, I think the management had enough of us, and we had enough of each other, and we certainly had enough of getting it rammed down our throats that the training that year went to a different element. Normally the week or so, 10 days before a match, the training sort of eased off and we went playing a lot of football. But right up to the final, the foot was right down all the way, because like there was a lot of great players in that team, a lot of great characters have you met, and a lot of fellas, if you gave them an inch, you wouldn't find them on the map because they'd take that much distance out of it, myself included, probably the biggest culprit. But I think the management definitely reined a lot of that type of stuff in and sort of kept us focused that year. That was the greatest thing they done. And then, you know, we'll speak later on about Jayo's impact coming in. That just added a huge different dynamic to the team that hadn't been there. And in fairness, no other team in the country had that like that. And probably no other team has had it since Donaghy came on in 2006. A player that just done something totally different than any other forward. So I just think it was a perfect storm of that group of players being so battle-hardened over 8 or 9 years. The management really dialing in where we should be, and just with a mixture of 1 or 2 new players coming in, just was the perfect mix. And you know that a lot of people say we fell over the line in 95. I always felt that, and I still do to this day, that, you know, Keith Barr was 26, 27, Paul Clarke was 26, 27. I was just gone 25. There was a lot of fellas on that team. I know Charlie was heading to probably 26, maybe. He was a little bit older, Clarke the same. But there was a group of players there that were just coming, or should have been coming to their prime. And then you had the likes of Jayo and these fellas that were really showing up well in training in 95 that could have pushed it on to maybe win another one at least. But look, you know, at the end of the day, if you're looking back and you've won an All Ireland, you've won a few things, it's never a bad thing until this second team came along and just blasted everything that anybody's ever done out of it. But look, you know, it's great.
Yeah, well, like the learnings that you get from being a player, you kind of look at, and Clarke, you've touched on this, bringing it into being a manager, a selector, and you've been a selector in 2005 right up to 2008 and back again under Jim. Like when you look at, you know, how you were preparing for games and what you were doing, is there much learnings that you were able to bring in, or were you looking at the game and how it developed and what changes you need to make then on how adaptable the new format is for the team?
No, it was probably going back. Like, it was probably every manager you played under. You were always looking and learning. You know, like Charlie came in under Kevin Heffernan. I think I was one of the last players Kevin Heffernan brought into a Dublin senior football team. You know, in '86, and you know, and then we went through the Brian Mullins managed us for a while. You know, in the '86, '87, and we had, you know, obviously Paddy Cullen, Jerry McCall, you know, working its way through, and you had great. You think about it, you had always great selectors there, fellas that had been there. Like Sean Doherty was always, you know, someone that you could look up to, and he was a selector and a coach. And then, you know, you were always learning. Fran Ryder brought our training, as Vinnie said, to a different level, you know. And then Mickey Whelan came in, he changed things around. Didn't suit everybody's eye. Not everybody felt comfortable about it because, you know, we had just won an All-Ireland. And even though we were at the end of maybe a 10-year battle of, you know, being close but no cigar, it was the type of thing, well, you know, maybe there is another one in us. Like I felt, let's go, let's roll up the sleeves. I want to do this again, you know. And I think most of the guys maybe thought that. And it was a bit disappointing that we did lose Pat and Jim, Fran and Bobby at that stage. But like, you know, I've seen it all evolve. Like obviously playing, and then you go in under pillar. You've brilliant ideas. You've great people in around you. But we actually were missing that business brain acumen, and also a couple of players that we were unfortunate not to pull through a name. And you came in with pillar as well. Like we were unlucky not to have Alan and Bernard Brogan on the pitch at the same time in any of our matches, you know. Either one started and one got injured or something like that. And they were Bernard was coming good. He was starting to see as a bit of a key player to us. You're probably losing Kieran Whelan a little bit. He was going down a bit. But you're learning from Pillar and from each other and so on. But you know what this group nowadays are doing is based probably on principles that we were fed as players back in the 1990s, you know.
But just on that, because like we were talking about this off air, if you will, and Charlie, remember I was saying, like, I've interviewed Alan and Mossy before, and Mossy tells a story about Tony Hanaho brought him down to Meath's after the game at the function, and he was just in awe to be around the team and see it. And Jim Brogan brought Alan into the dressing room after the game, and like that was, even though Bernard Senior was involved, he said that was the moment he kind of realised he wanted to start getting involved with Dublin GAA. And me to a lesser extent, when I hadn't got anyone like that to bring me to the function or sneak me into a dressing room, I had to go chasing you guys around in summer camps trying to get autographs. But did you kind of see that when you were in that moment, that there was just a wave of excitement coming through the capital and this new crop of players, like basically the current generation, where it all stemmed from that 95 team, just like the 80s probably inspired you guys? Oh, sorry, 70s.
And I know that Pat O'Neill alluded to it not so long ago, that the success that Dublin are enjoying now, and which started in obviously 2011, the embryonic stage of that started with 95. Because in 95, we've been 12 years since we had walked the steps of Croke Park. It was 83 prior to that. So a lot of people had gone from the age of whatever, be 6 to 18 and never seen Dublin win an All-Ireland. And when we did, you know, climb the Everest eventually, there was an outpouring of emotion that it was like pent up emotion, and it would the release of it was palpable in all around the city. And it's good to know that the likes of Mossy and the likes of Alan were there. I know Wayne McCarthy, who all the boys were very familiar with, also was a regular in the Dublin dressing room. Wayne used to help me when I was practicing freeze down on Erin's Oil, and would come into the dressing room after every game. So much so that some of the people in Croke Park actually thought he was my son. So you can see there stepping stones from 95 all the way through. Clarke spoke there about all the managers from Kevin Heffernan all the way through. And I think it's important that every player, no matter how many managers you have, you learn from every manager. You must take something from every manager, and you take something positive. And all those managers that Clarke just named have had a positive influence, I think, on everyone who's played underneath them. And some people are fortunate enough to get to an All-Ireland final and win it, and some aren't. Now, there's some players who we know who weren't part of our squad in '95, but who had soldiered with us most of the '90s, and we can never ever forget them. But I do think you're right, and I think it's not been too fulsome of us to say that we want to believe that the start of this great era started with the lessons that were learned from '95 onwards, and let's hope that everyone who was enjoying this great years of success that we're now enjoying, don't take it for granted. Take it that these will end. There will be lean times ahead. Hopefully not as lean as they were in '83 to '95 and '95 to 2011. Let's hope those days are behind us. But enjoy these days, because these days they will end sometime.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. I spoke to Brian Fenton about this. She's never lost a championship game. It's ridiculous, the stat that he hasn't had the battle scars. And Vinnie, from your point of view and going back to '95, you were such a big impact, and obviously the darling of the hill in some situations where we all remember Vinnie's going to get you. When you had that excitement around you, did you know that the impact that you had outside of the current crop of people? Did you know the impact you were having on the wider people outside of the team?
Yeah, I suppose by '95 that had sort of waned away a small bit, but I suppose coming in around '91, '92, probably into '93, yeah, there would have been a little bit of would have seen that. I suppose when I look back on it, I didn't have the maturity or wherewithal to sort of cope with that, and how to deal with it. And I didn't deal with it well. You know what I mean? You could have dealt with it a lot better. And yeah, you can look back and say, I could have, should have, would have. You didn't. But look, yeah, you would have seen that with kids. I used to always love giving time to kids and coaching with them and that. And as the lads were saying about the current team, it's hugely humbling to think that this current group of great players, some of the best players of all time, look back on their team and would think so highly of them, which is fantastic for us as a team and individual players. But I know often all the lads that they would have been very aware of the Dublin support at that stage. It wasn't as numerous as it is now, and how important we used to, all the guys outside Parnell Park that would be at every training session, how important they were part of our journey as well. And look, I suppose when you look at it, we were role models in a way. I'm just so glad that there wasn't social media back then.
Yeah, that kind of only came in towards the end of my time with Dublin, which I'm happy about as well. But yeah, but even at that, I still remember you guys getting mobbed at every summer camp that I was ever at. It was a case of nearly a photograph is easier than writing 1,000 autographs at times.
Well, it was important to remember at that stage, both Paul Curran and myself were Leinster Council coaches. We were in on 3 11-month contracts from '93, so that was in effect our job. And it was a PR thing as well as the coaching. So, when you're at the winning an All-Ireland, you have to try and make as much hay as possible, and you're representing the county and representing the team. So you have to go out and do your job and stuff like that. But for me, I always enjoyed coaching. I'm helping out with an under 10 girls team now and stuff like that. And some people will say that's probably the best place for me. Look at when it comes to coaching and stuff like that. But look, I love just talking to the people, especially as Clarke alluded to. We would have made huge mistakes and got beaten for them. We would have got hammered over certain things over the years. And I think that either kills you or cures you. And I think it cured that team in '95 to where they were, as I say, battle hardened, and the scar tissue was toughened enough to withstand whatever's going to be thrown at us. And I think that stood to a lot of people in life when they, after, if they get any type of difficulties, that they had that bit of resilience that they knew once you keep the head down, you work hard enough, you'll get through it, So like I still love coaching.
But and like coming back now, like I think we were talking a good bit about the aftermath and like the elation that you get from and the inspiration that a lot of people around Dublin got, and getting the next generation of the current Dublin team, excited about GAA was a huge part of what you did. But going into that season, starting back in Leinster, coming up against Louth, like what was in your mindset with that? Because you're after coming out of an All-Ireland defeat, and like what were you going into that game with Louth?
There was a slight different dynamic, as we said. The training was changed. I think they decided that, but early on we weren't aware that they were going to keep the foot to the floor. And we had Tom Morrissey, I think, that was come in as the psychologist. That everybody was, well, not everybody. I certainly didn't want to talk to him. I think it was the last one to speak to him, and I was under pain. I think Pat O'Neill said to me, "Well, if you don't talk to him, that's it. Good luck." So I ended up having to have a chat with him. And I think it was about 6-8 weeks before the championship, and he basically said, what's going to happen? And I told him what will happen. I told him I'd play the first game, be taken off, and I won't be seen again unless it's really needed. So even Tom, anytime we have a drink and a wry smile about it. But I suppose, look, I started wing forward that day, and I think it was the biggest sort of news was Jayo was making his debut a full forward. And, everybody has asked me since he took my place. And I said, no, you're confused. I actually started wing forward as Jim Gavin took my place because I was on one wing that day and I think Sean Catt was on the other wing. And funny enough, Sean got taken off before me. I got taken off after. So I always say Jayo was going to be there. I think Charlie and the lads would vouch for this, that the attention he took away from some of the better footballers at that time. Now, Jayo got far better as his career progressed, but his greatest achievement that year was drawing the attention of the other defenders. And in some cases, I've seen 2 or 3 defenders running out to try and clatter him while Charlie was standing at the edge of the square just to tap over another handy free or another handy ball. And I think that was the start of it really for us then, that we seen that Jayo making these, I wouldn't say the straight out runs, it was the lateral runs he used to make in behind fellas. Was defenders weren't used to that type of stuff. And that sort of made it easier for the likes of Charlie, the likes of Mick Galvin, and the likes of Desi then to move from corner forward out to centre forward. So there was a lot of things in the jigsaw that came along. And, Jim, in fairness to him, because 2 of the biggest foes that year were going to be attacking half-backs, because that was the year of the attacking half-back line. So you had the likes of Garrity and, what's his name, from Cork, Sullivan, I think, from Cork. They would have been there to be sort of counteracted. And as good as I'd like to think I wouldn't have been a great fella for running back chasing after fellas. Myself and Charlie being that we felled them or pulled them down or whatever, but not to chase back, where Jim was one of these fellas. If you asked him to do something, he would do it. And, going into that game, I just got a sense that we were there or thereabouts to do something. The team probably, I'd say 1 to 15, if you were giving them skill set, wasn't as high as maybe back in 91 or 92 or whatever. But collectively, it was a better team because the pieces fitted a lot better than they did beforehand. So, and I think as the games progressed, we just got the team got better and better as it went on,
I remember actually, Vinnie, something you guys might not know is the Saturday before the game in Louth, in Parnell Park, Pat O'Neill called me in off the pitch during the training session, and the management team were having a little bit of a selection meeting, and we had an A and another at right half forward. And
right.
They said to me, who do you think should play? And I said, I think you have to go with the man in form, and the man in form is Sean Cahill.
Yeah.
Sean Cahill went out the next day, was taken off after 20 minutes. So hence why I've never been asked again. However, what happened then is that Jayo came on, and he moved him in corner forward, and I think they moved somebody. I think that whoever was moved out wing forward, Desi moved out wing forward or centre forward, and he got a ball. I think it was at the town end in Navan, and he got upended right in just outside the right hand post on the 14-yard line. And he got up and he threw the ball to me to take the free. And I don't know if you remember, I threw the ball back to him. And I said, you take it. And he go, what? I said, you take it. But as I'm throwing the ball to him, I can see Paddy Moran coming along the sideline in the corner of my eye, and he started roaring for me to take it. But I
he was actually saying it's too far out for him.
Holy Jesus, I said, if he misses this, Sean Cal could be go back on, and I could be off. Thankfully, he knocked it over, and he settled into the game. I think after 2 or 3 minutes after he came on. So the minute he came on the pitch, he created that attention. And what he gave us, I think, that year and throughout his career was something that we didn't have that particular team didn't have. And that was the goal threat in front of goals, one-on-one. He was, without doubt, the best I've ever seen one-on-one. And while the rest of us could kick points from distance, from corners, from left foot and right foot, what we did lack was the goal threat. And Jayo gave us that goal threat. And I honestly think that without him that year, we wouldn't have got over the line.
Yeah, and I think the Laois game is kind of what you're kind of alluding to, is like he got the confidence against Louth and going into the Leinster semi-final against Laois and scored a goal the way he did.
Off, yeah.
Yeah, it just kind of brought that air and excitement again.
I think when he gave him the ball, he gave him a lovely crossfield pass, and Jayo got it. I think he slipped left or right past the defender, and as the defender caught him, his boot flew off. Yeah. And I don't know if you ever tried kicking the ball from 21 yards out without your boot. It's actually quite sore. But the ball rifled into the top corner of the net, and it was a phenomenal goal. And he was good in the first game against Louth, but and the attention surrounding him was big. But when he got the goal against Laois, it just exploded in a manner that none of us had ever seen. I think boy zone was big at the time, and they were calling him the 6 boy zone, or the 6-member boy zone. And how we cope with everything, all the pressure that was put upon him was phenomenal for a fella so young.
But I think you got to give yourself credit, Charlie. And you think about the players that were around him too, like Mick Galvin, himself, good friends, but Mick would spend time and talk to him and help him. Yourself was the same, and Desi too, So like he had really good experienced players, proper footballers, proper teammates around him too. He had the X factor, he had a skill level, but he was tutored so well and minded really well too,
Well, he had to be. He was so small, and in fairness, he was so small and so light. He used that to his advantage because he was very hard to hit. And Mark O'Connor, the core cornerback, or the core fullback in the semi-final, was left on his ass when Jayo just turned him.
He was tough out as well. He was only a young fella. He was only a minor. He was only 18, and he was taking a lot of punishment. And in fairness to Jayo, and as he did say, he got better and better and better. His career went on. He became more influential from play. But I think that particular year, you had a good year. I think Mick had his best year ever. And I think Desi had his best year ever because he was there. And I said earlier on that he'd done things differently than other footballers that we ever had. And I think you're right, Charlie. He had that goal chance, but also creating goal chances. That game we were talking about in Laois, I came on late, and just after he scored a goal, the ball came into him, and he actually got ploughed out of it. But I was making the run to try and get a pass off him. And normally he'd be put the ball down 30-yard free, but he gave me a no-look pass. He looked out the field and clipped the ball into me, which put me in 1-on-1 with the keeper, and I went over the bar instead of in the back of the net. But that's the type of thing that Jayo done that we didn't have beforehand. Fellas that, I don't know whether it came from the basketball or whatever, but his peripheral vision and was just leaps and ahead of anyone else we had. But I think that was his greatest thing, that the good players that we had, he made them better that year, because all the focus really, as Paul was saying, it was on him for the whole year. He was like, he was like a beetle, and Charlie could walk and nobody would know who would say how and where. The year before, he'd be getting mobbed and we'd be all getting mobbed. But now that wasn't the case anymore. It'd be Jayo was getting mobbed and we were all just left to our own devices. And I think that's what worked as well for the team,
Yeah, like from looking at it back then, like I found that definitely the case anyway. You could see that even going around to Parnell Park or going around the summer camps, it was just Jayo. But like Charlie, I think you mentioned that like to have someone around him that could give him a ball to try and take it free to get him in the game, like that shows leadership. And when I look at like the scores that you were racking up, like Charlie, in the Leinster Final, you scored 7 points. So you talk about goal threats, like Clarke scored 1-2. You know, like, so as good as it was that Jayo was there, and you need to have the other people around them, want to get him the ball, but then you also need to have the leaders to step up. And
going back to that Laois game, I scored a couple of points against Louth. I think I scored 3 points against Laois, maybe.
Yeah.
Stuck in my mind, and it was a motivation to me. It was Pat Spillane said in the Sunday game, when would I ever score 3 points again for Dublin? And he was dead right. I didn't score 3 points. I scored 1-2. It was my enjoyment. You were right, Pat. But, you know.
Yeah. I think that Leinster Final that year was very sweet for us all, because I heard before the game in '95 that the cumulative scores for the last 10 years between Meath and Dublin was the exact same. So that was sort of testify to how intense and how close all those games were. And for us to go out and win the final by 10 points, having gone a few points down in the second half, I think what I believe what we saw there was the culmination of all our frustration, of all our endeavours, and it all seemed to blossom in that last 15 minutes, when from 2 or 3 points down we put together a string of scores, and your goal, Clarke, it was just phenomenal. I remember, I spoke to someone today about it. I remember the last score of the game, I was taking a free, and I looked up in the canal end and I saw we were 9 points up, and I went, God, how good would it be to beat the old enemy by double digits, and as I did that, the ball fell off where I placed it, and I felt if I went back and replaced it, the referee might blow up or throw the ball up or whatever. So I said I kick it anyway and see what happened, and luckily it just went over the bar. But I know the emotion personally at the end of the game was huge, because I'd gone into the game, my father got ill the day before, and it was the only time ever any of my family came onto the field, and I met my sister on the field, and it was quite emotional at the time.
A 10-point win over Meath, like, that's huge given everything that she's gone through. I'd say that's the monkey off the back to an extent. You know, as Charlie, you said, getting double digits. You weren't known for your goal scoring goals again, Clarke. Like, things were the pieces of the jigsaw obviously were starting to come together. Could you sense that then going into the All-Ireland series?
Probably gave us a bit of a newfound confidence that we'd had a run of beating Meath, you know, for a number of years prior to that. And like, it was touch and go halfway through that second half, and you know, things went really well for us. Like, you can't say that Meath threw it away. Just things clicked. Now you had Curdner going up the pitch, you know, underneath the Hogan stand, like it's like a Rolls Royce going up and clipping a few scores, you know, and everybody was chipping in, and you know, there was an energy there. I think when you get on a roll like that, we got a huge belief in ourselves. And there was a couple of the Meath players were probably a little bit older than us, were near maybe the end of their days. And there was something, you know, had been, you know, put into our minds that, you know, maybe today, you know, you could maybe retire one or two of these players, you know. And it was something, I know, it was in my mind, God. And I remember the team talk, and one of the meetings that was sort of in your back head, like, you could really, you know, do a job on these and retire maybe one or two of the Meath lads, you know, who'd been around and had a lot of miles on the clock. So it was a bit of a drive for me. But
they were still a great team, right? Because the All-Ireland next year.
Look what they did the following year. You know, like, you know, that just shows how great they were. You know, it just shows, you know, our achievement was good, but like, for them to go 10 points, we Dublin by 10 points, the arch enemy, and then the following year, you know,
me and you were in Hill 16 for that one in 96, Clarke, if you remember.
Well, following year, that Leinster Championship following year, we said Vinnie Kieran on Hill 16. So we went from, I'll say 0 to 0, but we went.
Look, whatever. I was the sub in '95. Clark, you were an all-star from '95, and you went from that to.
Like that,
so, come here, your star certainly fell. It took a few. I was on the slide for a few years before that. Where you just went from all-star to Hill 16, pundit with myself. But I think back in that era, you know, we were probably on the end of 1 or 2 point hammerings. Like, to be beaten by 4 or 5 points back then, you were really being beaten badly. So to beat them by 10 points, as a lot of things went well, like for us to get there. Clarkie's goal was a great goal, but you know, for us to do that against a team, as Charlie said, there was very, very little between us. The only difference between us and them was they were probably slightly older than us, and we were sort of coming. But that was sort of, as Paul said, that was the end of some of their great players. But I remember looking at, I couldn't believe it, to think that you were at the beating the team that won 2 All-Irelands in the last number of years, beaten in '91, the final after 10 games. And then to go into Leinster Final, and everybody was saying we'd won a couple of Leinsters in a row, and you know, can we get this monkey off our back? And then when the chips are down for the team to deliver and go through and play to the final whistle the way we did that day, and to come out in the 10 points, but to look at the desolation of the Meath players at the end of it. And I did get a sense of, now you know what it feels like, lads, after '91, there was definitely a feeling of now it's even, you know.
Yeah, like
I think we look back at that time, and there's a lot of regret of '95, and the biggest regret I have of after '95 is that October, I think it was, when Paddy O'Neill told us that he was stepping down and the management team was stepping down, and the reason why they were stepping down, that we should have fought harder to keep them. We should have stood up as a team and made sure that the change didn't happen. I know there was a bit of a difference between the then chairman, John Bailey, and the management team, and it didn't end up well for Dublin football. But that, when people ask me, what's your biggest regret in football and your time with Dublin, it was that at that time we didn't unify ourselves as a group and go to the county board and say, no, this is the way it has to be, and this is the way it must be.
Yeah, I did get a sense that when Pat did announce to us that maybe that's what not that he was hinting at that. You're probably right, Charlie. But there was some fellas there, not me now in particular, but there was other fellas saying maybe a new brush. You know, now we were at to winning 5 Leinsters in a row. We're at to win the All-Ireland. Now we win 2 or 3 All-Irelands in a row with a new management, with a new ideas and stuff like that. But look, you know, sometimes you have to be careful what you wish for. Paul was saying earlier on, when Mickey came in, I would have been one of his biggest critics, and obviously I was one of the ones that suffered the most. And probably looking back in reflection, he was probably right to drop us and maybe teach me a lesson or whatever it might have been. But I think the biggest thing that he did is come in, and he what was successful for that team over a number of years didn't need to be changed that much. It just needed to be tweaked a small bit, but he threw it all out and wanted to go starting again. And I think he sort of put himself behind snookered himself from the very off, because like that team, if you look, the amount of managers and guys that came out that coach teams, there was a lot of fellas that would be very clued into how the game should be played, what way it should be played, or have a feeling. But that was never all really sort of gathered together in one sort of group the way I think the current team has gone on. Every opinion is listened to, and whether it's right, wrong, or indifferent, it's sort of put into the mix and see what comes out. And we weren't that type of team, Charlie, where, you know, everybody we didn't have players meet without the management at that stage, where I believe that happens now. And I think if we had had something like that where the team met on their own, I think that could have come out and we could have went back. But when I look back, and I have said that I think that team could have went on and won 96, because the way we beat Meath in 95, being in Hill 16 with Clarkie in the lashing rain, when Meath drew level with us with 10-15 minutes to go, and looking at the line and looking at the experience that wasn't on the line that day. And I think that's where we lost it. And I just think, I'm not talking about me, but if Clarkie had been there, the name, that might have made it different, you know?
Another point you're making, I will correct you on one point, Vinnie. We did have team meetings without the management there in our day. We had quite a number of them, and sometimes there was blood on the walls when we were leaving the dressing rooms. There was some harsh things said, and I know I said harsh things, and the harsh things said to me also. But there was and I think we're I don't want us to be critical of Mickey Whelan here. Mickey Whelan.
I was going to go on and say he came in. He was the best coach that we had in terms of football, but it was just the wrong time.
I think it was the right time with the wrong team, possibly, because I think the team was a much older team. I think you're right in what you say, that what has been successful for us, Mickey, departed from that. But that wasn't Mickey's fault. That was the way Mickey.
That was the team,
We probably weren't ready for that.
Yeah, no, I think it was a mixture of both. I think it was the team weren't willing to be moved. We had stopped being coachable, I think, from any outside that. I think we sort of invested so much time and energy with that management team that it got us over the line. That somebody coming in and trying to change all that and telling us, what way to suck our doddies didn't work for him. And his coaching that year I found was absolutely superb. He done more football drills. I learned more skills in that year than I did in probably the previous 10 years. But look, it's just the wrong time, or we weren't ready for him, or he wasn't ready for us, and it just didn't work really.
Well, one of the things I think that's really important to mention is, Charlie, just the point you said there about that honesty. Honesty is a great thing until it's directed at you, and then it's how you take it, right? Because I've seen it where people have gone in and been on teams where, like, if you don't have that honesty with one another, the team breaks down. There's chinks in the armor. You'll be found out sooner or later. But then it's about how people react to it. So, like, if you have people that, like, you're calling someone out, you're saying, look, you need to do this. I've seen it as well where honesty can really break a team. You seemed like you really had that balance where whatever was being said to you was being said to you for the right reason. You take it, you learn, you move on. And that just seemed to be right through the whole team.
Absolutely. And it was a team that, as I said, as we've spoken about, it was on the road for a number of years, was being well versed in how to walk out of Croke Park, a beaten team on big days. And as I said earlier, every experience you have, you must learn from, you must grow from, and make sure any mistakes you made, you don't repeat again. And the talks that we had were very upfront. There weren't always sort of big meetings, there were forceful meetings, but there were one or two that were coming down. I wouldn't call them roaring matches, but there was a lot of finger pointing, and that was required, and that's needed, because if you can't tell somebody what they need to hear, who is going to say it to them? Is it going to be their best friend who's not a member of the team? Is it going to be their girlfriend or their wife? No, it has to be the player who they share the dressing room with. And I've always believed the sanctuary of a dressing room should never be breached. Never be breached. And I know people write biographies, and I don't buy any of these biographies, I have to admit, because what I want to hear is never in those biographies. I want to hear what goes on in those dressing rooms. I want to hear what was said in those meetings. And they're all absent in the biographies, because I do believe you should never break the sanctuary of a dressing room. And what needs to be said stays in the dressing room.
I fully agree with you on that. And I think they're the special moments that, as a team, you can share with yourselves when you're having a few points together, when you're meeting up on a golf day, that,
I'll give you one story, Eamon, and some of the guys were there. But I think the very first game of the 92 championship, we played Offaly in Tullamore. I know we played Offaly in Tullamore that year, and I think it was 92. That I could stand correct.
That was the first game, yeah.
Was it? And was one player, and I'm not going to mention his name, but was walking around the dressing room with his boots on, with his socks on, and with his jersey on, and nothing else. He was so nervous, he didn't realise he wasn't wearing any nicks. And I had to say it to him. Now, I said it to him quietly. I'm not going to say who it was.
It wasn't me, it wasn't Clarke.
And I didn't know I wasn't wearing any clothes. I know he didn't. You better we're going over here in 3 minutes. Get your nicks on quickly. and he was. Oh no, I better give any more information because I'll identify.
I'll give you a bit of a story about honesty. When I got dropped from Dublin, Clarke was the first person that I reached out to, and I just asked him, like, what do I need to do to get back? And like, credit to the man, he just said, look, you're not strong enough. You're marking wheel out there and home, and you need to get bigger, and you need to get bigger quickly. And Clarke kind of took me under his wing and just said, here's what you need to do. Go and do it. Like, it was that honesty that I needed. Like, rather than someone wrapping their arms around me and saying, oh, look, you should have done this, you should have done that, like, don't mind that, don't mind Killer, like, he's already picking his favourites or whatever it might be. It was Clarke that came in and said, no, you're just not strong enough, you need to get stronger, you're not going to live with these lads. So that kind of bond that we spoke about and that honesty, it kind of stayed with you then throughout your whole career then, like, as being in sport or be it in business. I'd imagine it's something that you kind of look at as one of the real lessons that you've got from football.
I think we all take lessons from football into our private lives. And as I repeat, every experience you have to learn from, you have to grow from, and make sure the lessons you learn, or the mistakes you've made, you learn from them and you don't repeat them again. Because sometimes lessons you make in defeat, be them very small, can be highlighted. And if I go back to the 92 year when you were beaten by Donegal, some of us were asked to go into Arnott's and just do a photo thing they want to take a picture of the suit, or it wasn't a suit, it was the jacket and trousers. They want to take a couple of photographs of that. And about 4 or 5 of us went in at 1 o'clock or 11 o'clock of a Tuesday, and we're gone 10 minutes later. And when we lost, this became a huge issue that, they're out gallivanting, they're celebrating before the final and all this. Nothing was further from the truth. But in defeat, everything gets highlighted. And that got highlighted. And what we learned from that, and what Dublin GAA learned from that, was to make sure you're in full control of everything that happens coming up to an All-Ireland final. And it happened from there all the way through to now. And it's probably at a different level now to what it was in our day. But the lessons we learned from every All-Ireland helped us grow on to be a better team, a better squad for the next occasion that arrived. And the lessons we learned, 91 against Meath, never think the game is over till the game is over. And that didn't happen again with us. The 92 thing with the suits, that never happened again. And any lessons we learned going forward, and I think you alluded to earlier on about Dermot not starting the final in 95. Would I be right in saying Dermot came off after 5-10 minutes of the semi-final? He was picked to play and he came off. Or was that the Derry game? The Derry game the year before. Dermot was picked to play at fullback and he went in injured, and we had to be taken off in the first 10 minutes of the game. And the decision was made after that game at a team meeting that if you didn't play, or you didn't train the Thursday before the match, you weren't to be considered for selection. And that mistake that was made on that occasion never happened again.
Except for the final in 95 with you, Charlie.
Okay, sorry, I want to get on to that now.
Wasn't that I trained the Thursday night, I think.
I know, but you kick freeze. But at that stage, Charlie, like if you weren't on your blow, from play or from freeze, like we were in trouble in a lot, and that's going in with the strain groin. Like I suppose a lot of people probably wouldn't be aware of some of your antics before the matches, and the nerves getting the better of you. And
you won't be after this either, Vinnie. All you have to do is look at the man right above me here and ask who kicked the winning free in the All-Ireland final. We were never short of free takers on our football team. Clarke was there. He took over from me. Dessie Farrell was taking frees and he scored, I think, actually in the All-Ireland final as well, from the right wing, if I remember correctly. But it was Meath. It's against Meath, he kicked the sideline over. We had Jim Gavin who could kick frees. We had
but I mean, Charlie, you were such a big leader and a big sort of influence on the team and fellas around you, especially for the likes of Jayo coming in, and then the likes of Jim, who was really making us in his first year on the side. And for you to be missing out, the confidence may have sort of drifted out of the team. And I think, you know, we were all looking at you and said, you're going to play. And like, I remember you saying, Naylor's going to give me an injection. I remember going, right, Grant. I said, I was going because I knew I wasn't starting. I was going, just a good chance here I could be playing. I better practice me freeze. That was going to happen.
Yeah, like, I want to have 2 broken legs before they let me on ahead of you. Just to clarify that I don't like leaving things hanging. Pat O'Neill did say to me a couple of days before the game, that he would give me an injection to help me, and I'd be grand. I'd be able to play. And about 15 minutes before we take the field, I went over to Pat and says, "Okay, come on, Pat, I'll give you the injection now." And he says, "Charlie, I've never given any player a player-killing injection in my life, and I never will. Either you're fit to play or you're not. It's your call." So just so we're very aware, Pat O'Neill does not give injections, or never has given injection for anyone to play. It's and I want that to make very clear.
When you were playing the game, and I watched the game back last night on YouTube, you could see the pain in your eyes when you scored the goal. You'd obviously overstretched, and you got up and you were kind of wincing. In your head, were you thinking, don't show any pain because it could get the curly finger to come off, and Vinnie's been practicing freeze before the game?
Well, if you ever saw Vinnie practicing freeze, you'd know that I'm better off staying on. No, I hurt myself on the Thursday before the game, just kicking freeze in Aaron's oil, and it was affecting me. There's no doubt about that, and it disrupted. I was a creature of habit, and my build up to every game was the same, and this completely interrupted everything that I did, and my frustration and annoyance that this something so small could have such an influence and impact on me really upset me. And going into the game, I wouldn't say I wasn't right. I was right. My head was right, but physically I was short. And when the goal, I overstretched getting the goal. But come here, if I'd have broke my leg, kicked that ball in the net, I'd have happily have broken my leg, and so would anyone else on that team. I was able to play on. I played on to the second half, and unfortunately, the referee didn't want me playing any longer.
The red and yellow card came from that. I only found that out when I was looking at this afterwards. Is that's why the yellow and red card came to effect, because
it's called the Redmond card. It's not called the red card.
But like Clarky, when you kind of know that in your head, right? Charlie might be carrying. Is that in your head going into the game? You want them on the pitch. Do you go, right, I have to do a lot more work? Because the work that you and Jim did in that game, and even Corner, was unbelievable. Like, I couldn't believe the amount of ground that the three of you covered, and tracking back and doing everything that you did. Did you kind of take a bit more ownership and responsibility to say, right, we have to mind him a bit more, we're going to have to do a bit more of the extra work here?
I wasn't aware of the fact that Charlie was that injured. And it's quite possibly because of Charlie. Our first 3 scores were 3 different free takers, as it turns out. Keeper, myself, and Charlie. So that just, I need a longer range freeze. Keith, you take them, and then it was mid range. I took, and then Charlie took one. And that was 3 points. And then I don't know whether management didn't want to say to me, look, Charlie's really struggling here, because if Charlie goes off, I'm taking freeze. Because we relied on him so much, because he was the best free taker around. He was so important to us. Didn't put the pressure on me. I might have covered a lot of ground. I didn't kick great frees. I missed 4 frees that day.
Keep it important.
I missed 4, and and that would stick in my mind. If only it could have been but if Charlie had been on, I'm sure it would have been over. We might have been out the gate a little bit further. But it wasn't. It was part of our. It was part of our structure. We knew our half forward line, between myself, Desi, and Jim, were told to do a certain job and cover a certain amount of ground and do what we had to do. It came pretty natural then to us. So, and then we always knew if you had the likes of, Keith wanted to make an odd soiree up the pitch, someone would cover him. If I was right half forward and you had Paul Clarke going by, and you just had to slap back. So it was a seamless type of transition for us to work and do our job and get up the pitch, and we enjoyed it. You know, you looked at your direct opponent and said, "You're going to have some fun today, and let's go for a run." You know, so that was nice.
But like that line between you and Corner, like I actually didn't realize how good of a game he had that day. Phenomenal. And to have that extra support coming from behind you, and I think of like the current Dublin team with just that half back line, the launch pad that gives them, like that must be a big thing for you guys, because you have such an attacking half back, and then like when you realize that, okay, we need to, it's not going to be just like Charlie, you were kicking 7 points on average a game, Cracky, you were averaging 2 or 3 a game. You kind of need to have 7 or 8 people scoring if you're going to win an All-Ireland. Like, you're not just going to be reliant on the 1 or 2. And to an extent, that's probably where Tyrone went wrong. They were always relying on Peter Canavan. Like, you know, just how important was it to have that half back line that could attack the way they could in that final?
Well, we the half back line. Like, we Curran, Deegan, and Barr, and all three, as Clarke just quite said, were very comfortable on the ball. They were great at coming forward. They were, you know, making runs in, making the extra man. Curry was probably one of the fastest players, like with Clarke, and on that side of the field, we were phenomenal. Jim was on the other side, outside me, and Jim was just a workhorse in a way that, I don't mean disingenuous to him, that Jim was a magnificent footballer as well. Jim had one of the sweetest left foots in Ireland at the time, but he could walk and walk and walk. And you quite rightly said, Eamon, that half forward line, very, very mobile. And if you gave them a job to do, the job was done. Midfield, we had probably the best midfield pairing that I've probably ever seen playing for Dublin, up until we had Brian and probably Michael Darragh, because I thought Bealo and Steinsy were just phenomenal. They were very close friends, and that showed on the field the way they played together. But they're often sort of disregarded in many ways, the influence they had on the team, because particularly in the semi-final, Beelan and Steins, the two of them had a hell of a second half in that game. When the game was in the melting pot, they just grabbed the game with a scruff of the neck. I think along with Mick Galvin had a super second half on that day also, and they were the driving force that got us over that line. And we did have, like everyone, as I said earlier on, we had fellas who kicked the ball over the bar all day from all angles and all distances. But Jayo gave us the little extra dimension, and Vinnie as well. Vinnie was a phenomenal point taker. But Jayo gave us that little bit extra that we needed, and that got us over the line on that particular year. And I know I've said without Jayo, we probably wouldn't have won the All-Ireland. If it wasn't without Jim Gavin or without Clarke or without Steins in midfield, we wouldn't have won it either. So, and as Vinnie quite rightly said, it was all the pieces of the jigsaw came together at the one time to make the perfect storm. And thankfully, we limped over the line.
We possibly had the most attacking half-back line that probably played the game in the last 20, 30 years, and some of the greatest players in those positions. But it was also seen, say, go from 92, 93, 94 as a possible weakness that we had. I know we would have had some chats saying they don't let the ball in, all that type of stuff. And I think about putting sort of things together where when Jim went in and prepared to work all day long, and Clarke was always that as honest as you got in terms of work rate and working. They might have been beaten out the gate, not that they were, but they were from the first minute to the very end. And I think them going back and covering back allowed the likes of Paul had got 2 great points there, and there was space there in front of him to be able to run into, because the likes of Jim and the likes of Clarke had, I'm not saying sacrifice, but that's, I think the management is sort of, well, there's no point in telling Keith, Barr, you're not allowed to go past the halfway line. They tried to drop and do everything, but Keith was going to be Keith, and that's what made him a unique player. And Paul was just so good. Like, Paul would be on any team, anywhere, anytime. And Deegan was just such a consummate footballer as well. That that was their natural instinct, was to get the ball and play. So if you want to get the Dogs Award, Paul and Jim were those guys. Jim would go back a little bit further and dog fellas. Clarke, he can go up and down the park. He can do the dog. He can also get the points. And that's what I meant, that the team just gelled. The pieces just fell into place that year. And I just thought that, you know, the management team, what they did by, I say, railing in everybody and making the training so hard the Tuesday after a match, because we would have been famous for celebrating a lot on the Sunday and possibly the Monday and then possibly the Tuesday night after training. But after that year, that sort of stopped because we knew the savageness of the training on the Tuesday and Thursday was going to count against it. And I just think it was a combination of all those things. Like Jayo was obviously, to me, was the biggest piece in the puzzle for us. But there was also an awful lot of other things that went on that sort of made Clarke have his probably his best year. Definitely Mick Galvin, he got 5 points in the semi-final that year. Made what I would call excellent, brilliant footballers have their best year because Jayo was there. But Paul Clarke had a great year. Keith Barr had a great year. You're talking about Stoinsey and what Beelan as a spoiler in the middle was probably hasn't been surpassed since. And, you know, in terms of ball winner, natural ball winner, you know, there's not too many fellas would have won ball with Stoinsey in his palm. And, you know, Stoinsey wasn't a 6'4", 6'5" monster, but his way of getting up and down the park was superb for us. And he only came on in '94, so there was an awful lot of things happened. And probably moving me off the team probably helped a fair bit as well. So I made a little bit more room in the forward line for a few other fellas to flower. So I just think it was a combination of a lot of things that sort of combined us getting over the line in '95, you know?
Yeah, and like I want to touch on a few things there because we've talked about every line and we're working back now to the full back line and to the role that John O'Leary had.
They were brilliant. Good job, the rest of the team was good.
You're so good trainer, they kept you out of the team. They after every year, my dad used to get me the championship review on VHS, and my 3 favourite players outside of the Dublin team were Anthony Toll. I thought Toll was just amazing. Mickey Lindenhoff down, and I still think Mickey's playing now, like it's crazy. And Peter Canavan. And in that final, Peter scored. Now I know, well, he scored 11 points, 10 of them were frees or something, but he was a phenomenal talent. Kind of what Jayo was to Dublin, he was to Tyrone. And you kind of called it out off air, Charlie, that Kieran Walsh didn't have a bad game that day. It's just people will talk about this freeze that Peter Calvin scored, like, you know, and not really the performance of how good the full back line was and how good John was that day.
Yeah, like Peter, phenomenal footballer. We all know that. But on that particular day, he scored 11 points. A great return for anyone in an All-Ireland final. But 10 of them were frees. He only got 1 from play that day. And it's often not great. Kieran Walsh isn't often given the praise or the credit that he deserves for that day. The whole Peter Canavan to 1 score from play in an All-Ireland final. I don't think anyone else done it since in the 3 or 4 All-Irelands that he played. He wasn't kept to 1 score from play only. So it's a thing that, unfortunately, a lot of the people at the other end of the field tend to get all the headlines, and the people down that end, if they're not the goalkeeper, tend not to. A lot of people won't even remember who the full back line were that day. If you ask them, they probably don't remember Keith Galvin or Paddy Moran, and they were probably the three linchpins of the team that year. Dermot Deasy was in also. He was coming away out with an injury. But those 3 guys who ran the All-Ireland final, phenomenal. I'll give you a good story about Paddy Moran. And Paddy was phenomenal. And people have often asked me if I picked my best Dublin team of all time that I played with, who would have, and Paddy Moran is in every team. He's left corner back in every team. Because I think Desi Farrell once said about him that the opposition looked at him most dangerous when Paddy had the ball. Because Paddy didn't touch the ball. Paddy just hit everything that moved around him. And he was so strong and he was so hard. I remember, Clarke, you might remember the incident in Parnell Park with Niall Guyden, where he nearly put Niall Guyden over the wall with his shoulder. Mm-hmm. But there's another story which you may or may not know, was in the Leinster final, when things were the game was in the balance. We had just gone from being a couple of points down to a couple of points up. And the man involved in it said this to me after the All-Ireland final was Colin O'Rourke. He says, he turned around and he hit Paddy a punch. And he said he hit Paddy a punch so hard that he had to move away from Paddy because Paddy hit the ground and he thought he was after doing it. Colin thought he caused serious damage. And he was actually a little bit fearful as he went away. And he looked over his shoulder. And as he looked over his shoulder, Paddy was running back at him. And Paddy came back at him. And Paddy didn't say anything to him. Paddy just gave him a nudge in the shoulder. He says, I'm back. And Colin O'Rourke said to me, that's when I knew we were a beaten team. And that's what Paddy Moran brings to a team. Paddy doesn't have to touch the ball. Paddy just has to be there. And again, as I repeat, every team I pick, Paddy Moran is left corner back.
Paddy was a huge presence towards the team because his standards in training never dropped. He played every training session like it was a match, like his life depended on us. And like Charlie, you would probably mark him, I would have marked him. And you knew if you got 2 or 3 sessions and you were marking Paddy and you were going well, you were ready for anybody. And you know what I mean? I remember Naylor saying it to him a couple of times, Paddy, if you get the ball, pass to the nearest fella or kick it as far up that field as you can. Well, you know,
the day before the All-Ireland final when we were in Santry and Pat was going around, he said, John, make sure kick outs long, any high ball, communicate. And he said, Kieran, make sure you stay tight out in front. And Keith, when you get the ball, I know you want to go forward with it, just be careful. Paddy, he says, what can I say to you? He says, Paddy, you broke up half of this team, so go out and break up half of theirs, will you?
Clarke, in 2008 when we lost at Tyrone, myself, Clucko and Shane Ryan got a one-way ticket to Amsterdam, and we met Ram Moran in the airport, and he came up and he slapped Shane so hard, and Shane had still been out from the night before. He hit the ground in the airport. Like, he actually just came up and said, Shane, how you getting? And hit him, and Shane fell to his knees. So I'm not even shaking his hand. It was just like,
can you imagine what he was like when he attended to hit you?
Don't get him angry. Charlie was talking about Kieran there at fullback. We would have marked him again or been on him in training, and you might have got the ball in your hand, but he was a very difficult fella to get around to try and get a shot off because he's a very clever footballer in that respect. And like, I've been out a couple of times with Wally, and he'll say, "Yeah, you only scored a point." You say, "Yeah, but you felled him for 10, 14 yard frees after it, you know." But look, he was a great player here, and he was another guy that was on the, I think he was on the 82 All-Ireland minor team, was he? With a few others. So he was on the 84. He was on your team, Clarke, was he? Yeah. And you know, again, he was around a long time as well, and his day came. And then I suppose, you know, then you go to Keith, a cornerback, and I think, you know, it went from who's going to play there. It looked like young Paddy Christie was going to get in, and he broke a finger, and then Keith had just come onto the panel and fresh-faced, and I think he was wearing fake tan, and him and Jayo just sort of got it. They were the spies of the team, and they were a breath of fresh air that he came in and played and trained with a smile on their face, and you couldn't help but when you're around them just being in good form and good humour with them. And like, he went out, he had a great game in the semi-final, very solid in the final, and you know, and Charlie's right, it's an awful pity that the full back line generally don't get as much as the forwards or the marquee players on any team. Like John O'Leary will go down in any discussion as the great goalkeepers of all time. And, you know, sometimes these guys are sort of left behind. But like Paddy Ram, if you asked anybody in the team, they'd all have huge affection for him. To me, it was just his standards and training in the physicality and what was needed to be done. But in training the match days, talk about getting you sharp. Like, I've no doubt, I've often said to him that I marked him, or he would have marked me on the B team in 92. And without him on me in 92, there's no way I would have been anywhere as good as I probably was. And I think all the players seen that. Wally was one of these guys that would just go in and, you know, cornerback, wing back, full back, whatever you need, and we do that. And Keith was just one of these fellas that came on. And they say, I suppose they come on to thinking that, we'll win All-Irelands every year. We get the All-Ireland finals every year. We knew from the previous 4 or 5 years that doesn't always happen, but they probably thought that was going to roll on all the time, but they don't get the credit that they deserve. I probably get more credit for 95 than Keith Galvin, fellas that were actually on the field for, the majority of the game, which is strange. But look, what you do.
Been in a few nights with Keith Galvin, and he's still making the most of that. So don't worry about that. He's enjoying it.
Yeah, fair play. He's entitled to it.
Like, getting back to the final now, like, the one thing that I got from the match again was the pitch invasion. How good that meant. Like, I know you were like the euphoria of that final whistle going, winning by a point, but then to have the fans running on. Could you see your family? Could you see your friends? Or were you just on that cloud you couldn't come down from?
I think I might have been close to Hogan stands when it happened, and I seen it all coming. And then the guards used to make a horseshoe around the tunnel area, leading up to the cup. And Charlie would know my dad very, very well from the fire brigade, and I'd be a quiet enough man, and he was at the game that day and wouldn't say an awful lot. Like, he'd be fairly critical, and even nowadays he doesn't say that, and be critical even of the present Dublin team. And I'm trying to explain to him how the game is evolving and why people are doing certain things. When I came through the cord and broke through the cord, the first person I seen me was my dad, and I never seen emotion in my father before. Like he'd have gone in and done overtime for previous All-Irelands, or he was covering Charlie in different fire stations to let Charlie out for training or something. But my father was in the middle of this horseshoe, and he just said, "You done it," and turned on his heels and disappeared. But it was, it is surreal. You see the photographs, and you can look at everybody's face that day standing up in the steps. Really different sets of emotion. Like, there's people looking for certain people in the crowd. There's people looking around trying to take it all in. So there's some in shock. There's some, just it was a surreal event. And even then, as Charlie said, when we finished, we were brought down the back of the Hogan and into Crow Park headquarters, and inside there was a fountain, and we stood around this fountain talking. Said we have to calm down and get the crowd out, and then we walked underneath the Hogan stand down to the dressing room, and they were saying, "What's this? Is this the way it's supposed to happen? Is this what it's all about?" We weren't. I don't think we were prepared for the win. We never thought about it. We just thought of playing. Let's get the result. There was no thought of anything else. So you just were in the moment, as to say, and not sure what to do.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, I'm sure the three of you have a different memory of when that final whistle went, what happened. Like, what was it?
I remember when the whistle went, I ran out onto the field, and as I ran past Pat O'Neill, and Pat O'Neill actually didn't know we'd won the game.
That was a draw.
Pat O'Neill thought it was a draw. He thought the final. He thought the final was allowed.
Kind of touched it.
Yeah. People say, "What about the last point?" I said, "You mean the last free? Not the last point. It was a free." So he thought it was a draw. So I didn't look back at him. I think it was Fran Ryder was telling him, "No, we won." So I was able to run on. I don't remember meeting anyone. I on the field. I remember going into that horseshoe, as you were referring to, Clarke. And I met a next door neighbour of mine who was a groomsman at my wedding, and he was a security guard, and we had a big hug, and I remember, I don't know if you do know this, like, if you're sent off, you're not supposed to partake in the after-match activities. You're not supposed to go up the steps and so I didn't know whether I should or shouldn't, and I decided I'm going to do it. And Wayne Daly was beside me. He was in front of me, and I still, even when I got to I was going to walk past and not lift the cup and leave us and say I didn't partake, because I didn't want to I was in enough trouble. I didn't want to get into any more trouble. But I said, no, I'm going to do it. So I lifted the cup up, and I was the last to lift the cup and I think I left the cup behind me. I think I walked off it after there. I don't know who picked it up, but I do remember because of the health and safety, we weren't allowed to go back down onto the pitch because the crowd that was on the pitch and there. And it was a bit. I completely agree with you. When we sat down there, I stood down there in the Ardcarla area. It was a little bit surreal. You know, is this what winning an All-Ireland's about? You know, we should be on the field like all the others had been in previous years, like Clare were 2 weeks ago. But we're being deprived of it. It was done for the proper reasons, I know, but it was a little bit anticlimactic at that time.
Yeah, I think my memory of it was, I suppose, after the 2 beaten All-Irelands and the crowds running past you and you being left sort of on your own. It was amazing to be jumped and hopped all over and getting slapped in the back and jumping into players and just not know where to go. Like, look, the last kick out I was competing for, all I wanted to do was get the ball. So I had the ball, and I think it was grabbing out a Bilo, and Jim Gadden was in front of me in that iconic photo now, as you see Jim on his knees. But I'm halfway up trying to catch the last ball, and the referee had to blow the whistle. But again, we were in that horseshoe, and we all went up, and there was a bit of just relief, satisfaction, but real, is this what it was all about? Is this what all the heartache and breaking? You know, don't get me wrong, it's something that we all always wanted. But I found myself outside walking into the actual under the Hogan stand where the supporters were streaming out, and I was walking up in my boots at the ball, and the first fellas give us a cigarette, and I'd going up to the changing room and getting in to try and get back out onto the pitch, and you know, but like what I have to say, I don't know if the lads remember when we got back into the dressing room, just the huge sense of achievement that a group of fellas had got together, and you know, all their lifelong dreams had come together in one moment in different ways. And I just thought it was unique, and it was some fantastic experience, I think, you know.
The dressing room was special, all right, Vinnie. But getting to the dressing room wasn't special, because as you said, we walked underneath the Hogan stand, and all the crowd were in the Hogan stand, and we were sort of there. We could have got a burger. We just went down, and I remember actually getting to the door, and we couldn't. We had to knock on the door, and no one had opened the door.
Yeah, they couldn't believe the team was outside.
There was a team were outside the door, so we were outside the door trying to get in, and no one was answering the door. We eventually got in, but the dressing room was special, very special.
The dressing room is when it's you guys, so it's when it's just the players, it's the management, it's people that you've.
It was for a very short time, if you remember, because all the wives came in.
Yeah. All right, I didn't know that.
A load of the wives came in, and they were in the dressing room. So it took a little bit longer to get out of the dressing room so we could have a shower. But yeah, it was. And I think it might have been Keith actually, who went out and got the stewards to open the door and let all the wives in. Could be wrong, but I'm really certain it was Keith Barr.
I suppose they're the special moments when it's just you, and you kind of look back and you say, well, look, you can look one another in the eye, and you did the hard yards on a Tuesday, Thursday, on a wet pitches in January and February to be there in the end, and to get there, and then the aftermath. I'm sure the explosion in the city, we've talked about how it inspired the current crop and the 2011 team to get involved. Did you ever envision it would be as big as what it was? And I know the whole Jayo hype and how crazy that was. From speaking with Jayo, but did you guys just ever think it would be what it was?
No. I'm Clarke and Vinnie will remember a bus journey we had in '92. After being beaten by Donegal, it was a joke. And when we won, we were fearful of what might happen. And we were in Dame Street, was it in the Central Bank, where they held the public presenting Sam to the homecoming, whatever you want to call it. And we could only see the match in the Saw Street and Trinity College. And it was full, it was thronged, and we could see up Dame Street, it was thronged. And after it, they put us in the bus, and they were bringing us. Why did they bringing us in the bus? We thought we were going back to the hotel. I think it was the Burlington we were in, going back to the Burlington. And they brought us, and then we went around, I think it was the Lear Street, or Westmoreland Street, whatever one it is. And then we just saw the rest of the crowd. That was Westmoreland Street and all up O'Connell Street. And that was just breathtaking to me. When I saw that, I went, oh my God. I realised then fully what we'd done the day before, because I had never seen a crowd like that in my life. It was Paddy's Day 10 times over up O'Connell Street, and it was phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. And that was one of the most enjoyable times I felt was that journey up O'Connell Street. And all the kids, there was loads of kids there, the smiles on their faces. There was grown people men who were crying nearly because they thought we thought this team in particular had sort of been through the mill so much over the previous years that we'd never get over the hurdle. But that was a special moment, I thought. And I know I remember on the bus going to Pat O'Neill, and I looked at him and I says, that painkiller injection you didn't give me yesterday, I might need it tomorrow morning. He looked at me and walked away.
Is that what, like, Clarke, you've been kind of involved in various different teams now over the years, but can you relate back to then as well? Like, did you get the same buzz when the team when you won the last All Ireland as being a selector versus '95?
No, not even close. Not even close. I mean, it's like, Vinnie said it earlier on there about, like, we won the All Ireland. Now this crowd of players are winning 6, 7, and who knows, maybe 8. But I would feel about it that one All Ireland to me is as important to me as it is their 7 to them. Like it means that much to be so part of a group of players, to be part of Dublin, if you want to call it history, and what has come from it. So and I don't take it at the moment in time that these lads, they don't appreciate what they're doing. They don't appreciate what they're achieving. It is always in hindsight. There's always those few years down the road when you might hear one or two more stories, or you share a few things with each other, and things have happened in each other's lives. So the next time we will meet up, we'll be different people in a lot of ways, but we'll be still the same group in so many, So see what these guys are achieving. They are an incredible group of men. Like, it's frightening. It's unreal. In some ways, it's not even right. The things that they're willing, the lengths and depths that they're willing to go to achieve what they've achieved. Could our group in the 90s have done that? I think we went to certain lengths and certain depths to achieve what we did, because the game was different, society was different, the demands were different, the expectations are different, the length of a season, the number of games you have to play. There's so much detail that they go into. But our All Ireland is as important as if they're 7 or 8. I think we'll all appreciate that.
Yeah, and I just kind of want to finish up. I don't know if any of you have any stories you want to tell before we kind of wrap this up, Vinnie. I don't know if you've anything on the boys.
Charlie said it earlier on, to leave the dressing room, the sanctity of the dressing room where it is. So I'll bow to that, Charlie, for you on this one. But I suppose, how we done in the hours or so, the 2 or 3 hours after the win, I suppose everybody went their different ways. I ended up back with friends of mine back in one of the bars in Fairview, I think, Coles. Well, Eamon, a lot of your mates drinking there. You used to drinking there yourself. So I ended up, I was saying, look, you're playing catch up with these fellas, because they were at being on the bar all day. So you're drinking a few whiskies, and and you hadn't been out that much and all that year. So I ended up getting dressed up from head to toe in blue. I think Charlie and Paul remember this. And I missed the queue for the dinner, and arrived in a top hat, blue top hat, sunglasses, and a Dublin waistcoat in the middle of this, I think, the speeches. And I was ushered out the doors by John Bomber Costello. And I suppose it's just, for me, it was getting back to, family and friends and club mates and stuff like that, to share the moment with them, and then go back to the team to celebrate as we did, and we did well. And you know what I mean. I remember I had a promise that John O'Leary had made to me early on in the year, that if we won, that he'd give me the cup that night, because I don't know if the lads knew that I always got the cup the night of the match if we won Leinster or league or whatever. So I chanced my arm with Sam. And John, as true as his words, we were in the hotel, and Sam was being put to bed by John Bailey. And I said, John, what's the story? And he goes, don't be worrying. So 5 minutes later, I followed John out, and John gave me Sam, and he said, now, I'll be down to your house 9 o'clock in the morning. We're going out to North County. I think we're going out to Pat's on a base, one of the schools there. And John said, I'll be down first thing in the morning. So that was grand. So we ended up back, I'd say, about 10:30, 11 o'clock that night. It's going to be in with the Sam. So you can imagine the hoo-ha. There was that amount of crack. They actually shut the bar on me. They closed the bar down and said, right, everybody out. And I was like, what? We have Sam. What are we going to do? So we ended up at a club that I've managed and played with in Newton, St. Monica's. So I rang them and they said, yeah, come up. So we ended up there until God knows whatever in the morning. And then, sure enough, I probably got in about 2 minutes to 9 to meet John, to go down on the base. And we had a few brekkie rolls and stuff like that. But look, I suppose the initial 3 or 4 days after is a blur for most fellas, which they are, because you're celebrating with everybody and everybody wants a piece, and you're being pulled left, right, and centre. But that was my standing moment, having nearly getting onto the Sunday game speeches, and then getting the cup to go to your closest, your nearest and dearest with it that night. There's not too many fellas can say that, which I'm lucky enough to have that memory.
Yeah, and you can enjoy it, because the next year it could be all gone. You could be standing on the hill and so.
Yeah. Well, that's nearly a full 7 or 8 months later.
For 16 years. It was 16 years before we got back there. People often forget, when people nowadays talk about splitting Dublin in two, people don't remember the bad old days when, like, we didn't get one all Ireland.
Pat O'Neill always said that anytime we'd met up and whatever, he said, you don't realise it. Only in the fullness of time will be realised the depth of of what we'd actually done. And I agree with what you said, Paul, that the amount of sacrifice, heartache, pain, blood, sweat and tears that went into winning 1 hour was equivalent to what these guys are doing. And they're a superb group, and they're a lot different than our group in a lot of ways, that they're probably more coachable, and that's probably the education from the development squads all the way up that we wouldn't have really had. We would have had our own clubs and stuff like that, but we wouldn't have these high performance, say, development squads all the way up to sort of, to knock a few knock a few edges off, a few of the roughness of players, especially, say, the likes of myself. It could have made us more rounded players and stuff like that, and therefore we could have maybe won a little bit more. But I do agree that to have won All-Ireland after all that effort is on a par with everything.
Well, I think I did something today, and I said something, and it's only when I said it I realised how apt it is. And with what's going on, some of the conversation going on from certain people in the media and certain pundits on RTE, that on that occasion in '95, 2 people lifted a trophy: John O'Leary and Paul Curran, a North Sider and a South Sider, and that's the way Dublin will always be.
And on that note, Charlie, I'm going to finish up and just say, look, I suppose the thing I take from it is everyone's story is different, and like your story from '95 is different to the story of the current team, is different to the story of the team in the '70s. And I think everything that you went through as a team, like be it the '92 game, losing to Derry in '93, and then '94 as well, like, and the battle scars of '91. I think your story is unique to you guys, and that's what makes it so strong when you tell it, and resonates with so many people, because the emotion, like we're at 1 hour and 34 minutes now, and I could probably spend another 2 hours talking to you, because I got so much from you guys of just the sheer emotion that came from it, trip back memory lane of talking about Jayo kicking the score against Laois, but even at that, not starting against Louth and Charlie giving him the ball to take the free to get him in the game. Like, you know, there were so many different moments throughout the year that makes it unique to you. And it was a pleasure to walk down memory lane and to share them moments with you. And I want to thank you for your time. And I really, really do hope you get to have all them moments, Clarky, of all the hard work as a committee that you have put in, because, you know, there is such a good group of players there, and it's important to celebrate these moments and celebrate these milestones of 25 years. So, look, thanks for your time tonight. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Eamon.